My daughter-in-law mocked me while I was renting. You're going to die poor and alone. When I bought a villa for myself, my son appeared saying, How nice. My wife will love raising our children here. I smiled and simply made a call. I'm glad you're here. Follow my story to the end and tell me what city you're watching from so I can know how far it has reached. My name is Amalia, and at 66 years old, I thought I had seen every kind of cruelty life could offer. I was wrong. The invitation for Ephraim's birthday dinner arrived on a cream-colored cardstock, one of those that Jimena always demanded for everything. Join us for an intimate family celebration, it said in her perfect, overly manicured handwriting. I should have been suspicious. Nothing Jimena organized was truly for the family. I spent the afternoon getting ready, choosing my best dress from the few I've kept since Florencio's funeral 3 years ago. The navy blue one with small pearl buttons that he always adored. I even indulged in a trip to the salon downtown to get my silver hair styled. It was foolish considering my tight budget, but it was my son's 38th birthday. Some occasions are worth the effort. The restaurant Jimena chose was one of those places that screams money from every corner. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths so starched they could cut paper, and waiters who moved as if they were dancing between tables that cost more for one dinner than what I spend on food all month. I held my small purse tightly as the hostess guided me to their table. Ephraim stood up to greet me, and for an instant I saw flashes of the little boy who used to run into my arms after school. Happy birthday, my love, I said, hugging him. He felt more rigid than I remembered, colder. Jimena had trained him well. Thanks for coming, and Mom. His smile seemed sincere, but there was something distant in his gaze. Jimena was seated next to him, her blonde hair pulled back in an elaborate bun, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. She offered me a forced smile that didn't reach her eyes. Amalia, how lovely, you look presentable. The word floated in the air like a slap. Presentable? Not beautiful, not elegant, not even nice. Presentable, as if I were a charity case she had the grace to allow at her table. The night began without incident. Ephraim spoke of his promotion at the law firm. Jimena mentioned their upcoming vacation to Italy, and I listened, nodding at the right moments, trying to contribute when I could. But everything I said seemed to amuse Jimena in a way that made a knot form in my chest. When the waiter brought the wine list, Jimena made a whole show of ordering the most expensive one. Let's order the Chateau Amargo, she announced, and then looked at me with feigned concern. Oh, but maybe we should order something more economical. I know things have been difficult since you moved to that tiny apartment. My cheeks burned. Yes, I lived in a modest rental now. After Florencio died, the big house felt too empty, too full of memories. But the way she said it made it sound like I was living in utter poverty. The wine sounds delicious, I managed to say, my voice firm despite the humiliation rising in my throat. The conversation during dinner continued, but I noticed how Jimena steered every topic toward money, success, and how well they were living. When I mentioned that I volunteered at the community center, she laughed. She really laughed. Oh, Amalia, how sweet, playing bingo with other lonely old ladies. How gratifying that must be for you. Ephraim said nothing. He just cut his meat and avoided looking me in the eyes. The breaking point came when Jimena got up to go to the restroom. I thought maybe I could connect with my son, talk to him like we used to before she came into his life. But when I reached out to touch his hand, he pulled it away. Mom, about your housing situation, he began, his voice awkward. What about it? Well, Jimena and I have been talking. We're concerned about you living alone in that neighborhood. Maybe it's time to consider other options. Other options? The words chilled my blood. What kind of options? Before I could respond, Jimena returned to the table with a satisfied smile. How nice, you're talking about Amalia's future. Just yesterday I was telling Ephraim how concerned we are. She leaned forward, her voice cloying with false concern. Honey, you're not so young anymore. You live alone. You can barely make ends meet. That's not sustainable. There are some very nice assisted living residences that offer quite affordable prices. The room spun. Assisted living? They wanted to lock me up. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself, I said, my voice barely audible. Jimena's laughter was sharp, cutting. Oh, darling, of course you think so, but you have to be realistic. You live in a rented room. You probably eat canned soup for dinner. You volunteer just to have somewhere to go during the day. It's honestly very sad. She took her wine glass, sipped calmly before delivering the final blow. Let's be honest, you're going to die poor and alone anyway. Wouldn't it be better to have some dignity in your final years? Her words hit me like fists. Die poor and alone. The cruelty was so casual, the way she smiled as she said it, as if she were talking about the weather. I looked at Ephraim, expecting him to defend me, to tell his wife she had gone too far. He said nothing. He just stared at his plate, jaw clenched but without opening his mouth. Jimena continued to speak as if she were enjoying my silence. We're only thinking about what's best for you. Ephraim works so hard, and we're planning to start a family soon. We can't take care of you too. Take care of me as if I were a burden they had generously carried, instead of the woman who raised Ephraim alone after his father abandoned us, the one who worked double shifts to pay for his college, the one who celebrated every achievement and comforted him in every fall. I slowly stood up, my legs trembling. "Excuse me," I whispered. I took my purse. "Where are you going?" Amina yelled behind me, but I didn't answer. I walked through that elegant restaurant, my steps unsteady. I passed tables full of families who seemed to genuinely love each other, couples holding hands under candlelight. The hostess smiled at me as I passed. She probably thought I was going to the bathroom, but I walked straight out into the cool night air and kept going until I reached my car. My hands were shaking as I fumbled for my keys. Behind me, I heard the restaurant door open. "Mom, wait!" Ephraim's voice yelled from the sidewalk. I turned with a spark of hope in my chest. Maybe he was coming to apologize, to tell me that Jimena had crossed a line. "You can't just leave like this." Jimena feels terrible about what she said. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, looking for any sign of the boy who used to defend me from bullies at school. "Really? Of course she does. She was just trying to help you. We both are." There he was, even now, taking her side, justifying her cruelty. And in that moment, I understood with painful clarity that I had already lost my son. Jimena had won completely. "Tell her not to worry about me," I said in a low voice as I got into my car. "I'll be fine." As I drove away, I saw them in the rearview mirror, Ephraim and Jimena, standing together on the sidewalk, probably already talking about how dramatic I was being, how irrational I had behaved. That night alone in my small apartment, I sat on Florencio's old couch and cried until I had no more tears. But between the pain and the humiliation, something different began to sprout, something harder, firmer. They thought they knew me. They thought I was just a sad, poor old woman with nothing but their forced charity. How wrong they were. The next morning after Ephraim's birthday dinner, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The tears were gone, replaced by something much more dangerous: determination. I made my coffee just the way Florencio did, strong and dark, and sat at my small kitchen table with a pile of papers I hadn't touched in months. Bank statements, investment portfolios, property deeds, documents that told a very different story from the one Jimena thought she knew. Most people would be surprised to learn that this old woman, living in a small rented apartment with just enough to get by, was worth more than $1,800,000. Florencio was a genius with money, you know. Not just from his steady salary as an engineer, but from smart investments that grew quietly over the 30 years we were married. Apple stock bought in the 80s, real estate in neighborhoods everyone said would never be worth anything, a diversified portfolio that withstood every market crash and came out stronger. When he died, he left everything to me. "Take care of yourself, Amalia," his letter said. "You deserve so much more than what they have led you to believe." But I consciously chose to live simply. After Ephraim married Jimena, I saw her turn my sweet, attentive son into someone I barely recognized, someone who valued appearances more than substance, what people could give him more than who they were. So I decided to test them. I moved to a smaller place, drove an old car, dressed modestly. I wanted to see what kind of people they were when they thought I had nothing to offer them. I hoped it to be wrong. I prayed that Ephraim would invite me over just to spend time together, that Jimena would show a genuine gesture of kindness, that they would love me for who I am, not for what I could give them. Last night, they answered that question with painful clarity. I spread the papers on my table like a general's planning a strategy. The largest investment account showed a balance that would make Jimena's designer dress budget look ridiculous. There were certificates of deposit, bonds, and 3 rental properties that I managed through a property management company. Ephraim had never known about that income because I'd never had to touch it. My cell phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. Ephraim's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again and again. Finally, I answered. Hello, Ephraim. Mom, thank God. I've been calling it all morning. Look, about last night. What about it? His voice was tense, as if he were forcing himself through something unpleasant. Jimena feels terrible about what she said. She didn't mean it that way. I almost laughed. Then how did she mean it? She was just worried about your future. We both are. Maybe we didn't say it in the best way, but we love you. That word sounded hollow coming from him now. I see, so you're going to forgive her? Maybe come over for dinner this weekend. Jimena wants to apologize. Good. I imagined Jimena rehearsing her apology in front of a mirror, polishing the exact tone of feigned remorse. I'll think about it. After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my apartment and thought about the woman I used to be. Before Florencio died, I was confident, sociable. I participated in community associations and did social work. I hosted dinner parties and traveled with friends. But grief had made me shrink. I had become more reserved. Jimena's cruelty the night before had awakened something I had forgotten I had, the strength that sustained me to raise Ephraim alone when his father abandoned us, the determination that helped me build a career when it was common for women my age to stay at home. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer, Socorro Valdez. We had worked together when Florencio passed away, and since then she had handled everything related to my finances. Amalia, so good to hear from you. How are you? Complicated, I said. I need to make some changes to my will. Of course, what kind of changes? I took a deep breath, thinking of Ephraim's silence last night, his inability to defend me from his wife's cruelty. I want to remove my son as a beneficiary. Socorro's pause was brief but significant. That's a strong decision. May I ask why? Let's just say I've discovered things about his character that concern me. Okay, who do you want to designate in his place? I'd been thinking about it all morning. There was an organization that Florencio and I had supported for years, Silver Threads, which offered companionship and support to seniors abandoned by their families. People like the one I was becoming. I want everything to go to Silver Threads, I said. Every single penny. That's very generous, Amalia. Are you completely sure about this? It's not irreversible, but it is an important decision. I thought of Jimena's laugh, of how she dismissed my life as if it were worthless. I'm sure. I'll draft the documents. When would you like to come in to sign them? Today, if possible. After hanging up, I went to my bedroom and opened the closet I had been ignoring for months. Behind the everyday clothes hung the wardrobe of the woman I used to be. Designer suits from my working days, elegant dresses for charity galas, jewelry that Florencio gave me on anniversaries and birthdays. I pulled out a black Chanel suit I'd bought years ago and tried it on in front of the mirror. It still fit me perfectly. I've been hiding my light under a bushel, as my grandmother used to say. And for what? To protect the feelings of people who clearly didn't care about mine. It was over. I spent the afternoon at Socorro's office signing documents that would ensure my money went to people who truly valued it. On the way home, I stopped at the salon where I'd gotten my hair styled the day before. Mrs. Quintero, the stylist, Citlali, greeted me with surprise. Back so soon? I want to make some changes, I told her. Something more me. 2 hours later, I walked out of the salon with my silver hair cut into a stylish bob that took years off me. I felt lighter, more like the woman I'd been before grief and loneliness convinced me to make myself small. That night, I sat in the living room with a glass of wine, not the cheap stuff I'd been buying, but a bottle from the collection Florencio and I started together. I raised the glass in his memory. You were right, darlin', I said to his photograph on the mantelpiece. I deserve better. My phone vibrated with a message from Ephraim. Ma, Jimena really wants to make things right. Can you come for dinner on Sunday? She's making your favorite stew. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. I'll be there. But I wouldn't go as the grateful, diminished woman they expected. I would go as me. The real Amalia, the one with resources, options, and absolutely nothing to lose. They wanted to play games with my life very well, but they were about to discover they had chosen the wrong opponent. As I got ready for bed that night, I saw myself in the bathroom mirror. The woman looking back was someone I hadn't seen in years, confident, decisive, ready for whatever came. Tomorrow, I would start looking for a house, one that was worthy of the woman I truly was, not the facade I had maintained for people who never deserved it. Jimena thought I was going to die poor and alone. How little she understood about the power of a woman who had finally stopped caring about what others thought. The house hunt began that Monday morning. I had spent the weekend researching properties online, but nothing prepared me for the reality of what my money could buy. Mrs. Quintero, my real estate agent, Lourdes Zuniga, said as we pulled up to the third property of the day, I think you're going to love this one. She wasn't wrong. The colonial-style mansion sat on nearly 2 acres with century-old oaks and meticulously manicured gardens, 6 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a library with built-in shelves reaching to the ceiling, and a kitchen worthy of a magazine. The asking price was $780,000. A fortune for most, but perfectly manageable for me. It's beautiful, I murmured, my fingers gliding over the marble countertops in the kitchen. Through the window, I could see a garden that would be spectacular in the spring, and beyond that, a small pond with a wooden bridge. The previous owners were an elderly couple who took great care of it, Lourdes explained. They moved to Florida last month. All the major systems have been updated. And that library, I understand you're a big reader. I nodded, imagining myself in that room with leather armchairs and a fireplace surrounded by books, instead of the silence of my small apartment. This was what Florencia would have wanted from me. This was the life I deserved. I'll take it, I said. Lourdes blinked. You don't want to see the upstairs or discuss the offer? We could probably negotiate the full price. I interrupted her. Cash sale. How soon can we close? Her surprise was almost comical. Well, with a cash offer, probably within 2 weeks. Are you sure? Completely. By Wednesday, the paperwork was ready. On Friday, I signed the final documents and received the keys to my new home. I had never felt so empowered in my life. The moving process was simple. I hired professionals to handle everything while I supervised from my new library, already furnished with some pieces I'd ordered online. I only kept what really mattered, photographs of Florencio, my books, and a few pieces of furniture with sentimental value. Everything else was donated or sold. I waited until I was fully settled before calling Ephraim. 3 weeks had passed since his birthday dinner, and I hadn't spoken to him since I agreed to have dinner on a Sunday, an invitation I never kept. Mom, where have you been? We expected you for dinner and then you just disappeared. Jimena was so worried. I settled into my new leather armchair looking out at the garden where workers were planting bulbs for the spring. I've been busy moving. Moving? What do you mean moving? To where? I bought a house, Ephraim, a real house. The silence on the other end was so long that I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke, his voice tense, confused. You bought a house? How? I mean, what kind of house? A beautiful colonial-style home on Olive Street. 6 bedrooms, gorgeous gardens. I'm very happy with it. Olive Street? His voice cracked slightly. Mom, those houses cost more than I thought you. I suppose more than you thought I could afford. Another long pause. I don't understand. Where did you get the money? I could have explained. I could have told him about the investments, about Florencio's careful planning, about the life insurance and rental properties. Instead, I simply said, Your father was a very wise man with money. But you said, you were struggling, the small apartment, the tight budget. I chose to live simply, Ephraim. There's a difference. I could hear muffled voices in the background, Jimena asking what was going on. Then Ephraim's voice became more formal, more distant. Well, that's great, Mom. We really should come see it. You should, this weekend, Saturday afternoon. That will work. After hanging up, I walked through my beautiful new house, imagining the conversation that was undoubtedly happening between Ephraim and Jimena. I knew enough about their relationship to predict exactly how it would unfold. Saturday arrived with perfect autumn weather. I spent the morning arranging fresh flowers in the foyer and preparing coffee and pastries, although I suspected this visit wouldn't be very social for long. Ephraim's BMW pulled into my driveway at exactly 2 a.m. From the window, I watched them sit in the car for several minutes. Jimena was undoubtedly speculating while Ephraim kept his hands clenched on the steering wheel. Finally, they came to the door. Jimena had dressed to impress in a cream-colored designer outfit that I recognized as one she wore to make a good impression on wealthy neighbors. It probably cost more than most people earn in a month. She wore that expression she reserved for those she considered important, a bright, calculating smile with eyes that didn't miss a single detail. I opened the door before they could knock. Ephraim, Jimena, welcome. Mom. Ephraim hugged me, but I felt the tension in his shoulders. Wow, it's incredible. Jimena walked past him, her eyes already scanning everything she could see from the entrance. Amalia, what a surprise. This is quite substantial. Thank you. Would you like a tour? What followed was 30 minutes of thinly veiled evaluation. Jimena admired each room with the trained eye of someone appraising property, not visiting family. She took note of the square footage, the quality of the finishes, the view from each window. Ephraim followed her in silence, his expression growing more worried with each room we toured. When we reached the master suite, a spacious room with a sitting area and French doors leading to a private balcony, Jimena finally dropped the facade. This is huge, she said, caressing the silk curtains. Really too big for one person. I like the space, I replied calmly. Oh, of course, but being realistic, she turned to me with that sharp smile. I mean, at your age, is it really safe to be alone in a house this size? All these stairs, the maintenance, the loneliness. Ephraim shifted uncomfortably. Jimena, I'm just being practical, honey. Your mother is almost 70. What if she falls? What if something happens? Who would even know? I led them back to the living room, where I had already set out coffee and pastries on the antique table I inherited from my grandmother. As we sat down, Jimena continued her attack disguised as concern. Just the property tax alone must be sky high, she commented while choosing a pastry. And the heating costs, the insurance, the maintenance. It seems like a tremendous burden for someone on a fixed income. I managed just fine, I said, pouring coffee from the silver set that was a wedding gift from Florencio's parents. Jimena exchanged a look with Ephraim before continuing. Well, that's wonderful, of course, but we've been thinking, haven't we, honey, about our future. We want to start a family. And with Ephraim's new position at the firm, the place we live is getting a little cramped. I took a sip of coffee and waited. What Jimena means, Ephraim interjected, his voice carefully relaxed, is that this house would be perfect for a growing family. All these wasted bedrooms, the large yard for the kids to play in. It would be ideal. Exactly, Jimena agreed, her eyes gleaming with excitement. And you would have company. You wouldn't be alone anymore. We could take care of you, help with the maintenance and the expenses. The audacity took my breath away. Were they really suggesting that I had bought this house for them? That all my planning, my years of financial discipline, my independence, it was all for their benefit? Besides, Jimena added, getting more animated, it would be so much better for the kids. This neighborhood, these schools, are exactly what we want for our family. Ephraim leaned forward, and for a moment I saw a flash of the boy I had raised. What do you think, Mom? Wouldn't it be nice to have the family close by to hear the kids' laughter in these rooms? They sat there, both of them, waiting for my answer, with that certainty that, of course, I would see the wisdom in their suggestion, that I would be grateful for their generosity in wanting to rescue me from the burden of my beautiful house. I carefully set down my coffee cup and looked at them one by one. It's an interesting proposal, I said at last. Jimena's smile widened. I knew you would understand. It just makes sense. We can work out all the details. Maybe you could keep the master bedroom and we'll use the other rooms. The kids would love to have Grandma right here. Jimena has already been sketching out ideas for the baby's room. Ephraim added. That sunny room on the second floor would be perfect. I nodded thoughtfully. You've definitely put a lot of thought into it. We only want what's best for everyone, Himina said with that voice dripping with false sweetness. It's what family does. We take care of each other. Family, that word they had used for years to manipulate me, to make me accept less, expect less, settle for scraps of affection while I gave everything in return. Then I smiled. A real smile, the first genuine one I'd shown in their presence in years. You're absolutely right, Ahimena. Family should take care of each other. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked toward the window overlooking the garden. Behind me, I could hear them whispering, excited, already making plans for their new home. I need to make a call then, I said, turning to them. Excuse me for a moment. As I walked toward my study, I heard Himena's euphoric whisper to Ephraim, I told you she would change her mind. This is going to be perfect. Perfect, yes, I thought as I picked up the phone. It was going to be exactly that. I closed the study door behind me and leaned against it for a moment, listening to the muffled sounds of excitement from the living room. Himena's voice came through the walls clearly as she described to Ephraim her vision for our new home, our home as if she had already moved in, as if she had already claimed it for herself. My hands were surprisingly steady as I dialed Socorro's number. Socorro Valdez's office, Nayeli speaking. This is Amalia Quintero. I need to speak to Socorro right away. It's urgent. One moment, please, Mrs. Quintero. The hold music stretched on like an eternity, interrupted by bursts of laughter from the other room. I could imagine Himina looking through my things with new eyes, no longer seeing them as mine, but as hers. The crystal vases that were wedding gifts, the paintings that Florencio and I collected on our travels, the antique furniture inherited for generations, all of it already being mentally redistributed to her liking. Amalia, Socorro's voice sounded worried. Nayeli said it was urgent. Is everything all right? I need to make immediate changes to my will. Today, if possible. What kind of changes? We just updated everything 3 weeks ago. I walked to the window, looking out at the garden where I'd planned to spend quiet mornings with my coffee and books. In the reflection, I saw my own face, serene, firm, finally free from that desperate hope that kept me clinging to the illusion of family love. I want to add a specific section about my house. Very clear language. Okay, what did you have in mind? I want it established beyond a shadow of a doubt that under no circumstances can my son or his wife inherit this property. They will never live here. They will never own this. They will never benefit from it in any way. Socorro paused longer this time. Amalia, that sounds quite final. May I ask what prompted it? Through the door, I heard Ephraim's voice. The master bedroom has amazing natural light. You'd love the walk-in closet, Himina. They're here, I said in a low voice. In my house, planning how to decorate it, where to put the kids' rooms, how to help me carry the burden of being the owner. Socorro's tone changed to a professional concern. Do you feel pressured? Because if there's any sign of elder abuse or manipulation— No, I interrupted. None of that. They're not forcing me to do anything. They're just showing me exactly who they are, and I'm finally paying attention. What else would you like to put in writing? I thought about Himena's excited whispers, about the casual way Ephraim assumed everything I had worked for was for his benefit. I want the house to also go to Silver Threads along with everything else. And I want it stated that if they challenge the will, they lose all right even to visit the property, as long as it's under the Foundation's care. That's legally valid, Socorro confirmed. Anything else? Yes, I want you to draft a letter to be given to them after my death, something that explains exactly why these decisions were made. Would you like to dictate it now? I heard Himena's voice getting closer to the study door. They were coming to look for me, probably wondering why I was taking so long. No, over the phone. Can you come here today? I can be there in an hour. Does that work? Perfect. Use the back entrance through the garden gate. I'll be waiting for you on the terrace. After hanging up, I took a moment to breathe before going back to my guests. They were standing in the middle of the living room, Himina with her cell phone in her hand, apparently taking pictures. Just taking some measurements, she said with that brilliant smile, to see where the furniture would go. I hope you don't mind. Not at all. I settled back into my chair, noting how they both remained standing, as if sitting down would delay their plans. Do you want to see the rest of the house? The basement is finished. It would make a wonderful playroom. Himena's eyes lit up. Oh, that sounds perfect. And the attic? Mainly used for storage, but it could be converted into an office, maybe. For the next hour, I played the role they expected of me, the grateful, touched old lady, moved by her good fortune and their generous offer to share. I nodded as Himena described her decorating ideas. I smiled as Ephraim pointed out practical improvements they could make. I even offered to show them the property lines so they could plan their garden. They believed it all. These two people who swore they knew me, who saw my education as a weakness, my generosity as a duty, my love as something they could exploit without consequence. We should probably go, Ephraim finally said, checking his watch. We have plans for dinner with the Cardenases. Of course. I walked them to the door, accepting Himena's air kisses and Ephraim's distracted hug. We'll talk more about the arrangement, Himena said, already mentally installed in my house. There are a lot of details to work out, but I'm sure we can make it wonderful for everyone. I'm sure we can, I agreed. After their car disappeared down the driveway, I walked through my house with a new perspective. I no longer saw it as the trophy Himena believed she had won, but as my sanctuary, my decision, my independence turned into bricks, walls, and rooms filled with peace. Socorro arrived just an hour later with her leather portfolio in hand, and the face of someone ready for difficult conversations. Show me the house, she said without preamble. I want to understand what we're protecting. I showed her the whole place, not just the property, but also the scene that had taken place hours before. Socorro listened without saying a word, taking notes in her clear, neat handwriting. They really think you bought this house for them? She asked as we settled into the sunroom with a cup of tea. Completely, I replied. In their minds, everything I do is for their benefit. My financial problems were just annoyances to be solved. My achievements were assets they could claim. Socorro opened her portfolio and took out a legal pad. Let's draft that letter. Está letter. What do you want them to know? I stared out at my garden, remembering the years I spent trying to earn their affection, their respect, their most basic recognition as a person. I want them to understand that love is not one-sided, I said at last. That family isn't about what one person can get from another, but about what you give without expecting anything in return. I want them to know that I saw right through their performance, that I always knew exactly what they thought of me, and this house in particular. I want them to understand that this house, my house, will become a refuge for older people, that it will be a place for those whose own children saw them as burdens instead of blessings. Socorro wrote quickly, her pen scratching firmly against the paper. Anything else? I want them to know that I had a choice, I said, that even today I could have decided otherwise. But they made it impossible. Impossible to love them. And that's not my failure, it's theirs. As Socorro drafted the documents, I felt a weight lift from me that I didn't even know I was carrying. For years, I blamed myself for the distance between Ephraim and me. I wondered what I could have done differently, how I could have been a better mother, more deserving of his affection. But today I saw the truth. It wasn't about what I did or didn't do. It was about who they chose to become. People who only saw others for their usefulness, who confused manipulation with love, who believed they had a right to everything they could take. Ready? Socorro said, looking up from her papers. How does this sound? She read the letter aloud, and I nodded with every sentence. It was clear, honest, and final. It left no room for misunderstanding. It offered no margin for them to rewrite the story to their convenience. Perfect, and I said. When can you have the updated will ready? By Monday, you'll have everything ready to sign. Are you completely sure about this, Amalia? Once these documents are signed and notarized, they will be very difficult to change. I thought of Himena's excited whispers, of the casual way Ephraim assumed this house was his by right. I thought of the years they had treated me as a nuisance, a burden, a source of guilt and obligation instead of love. I've never been so sure of anything in my life. After Socorro left, I walked through my house once more. I no longer saw it as the trophy Hamina believed she had won, but as my sanctuary, my decision, my independence turned into bricks, walls, and rooms filled with peace. Tomorrow, Ephraim would probably call to talk about when they would move in. Hamina would probably already be looking at furniture and making remodeling lists. She would plan their future in my space, with my money, using my generosity against me once again. She had no idea that with every assumption, with every arrogant expectation, with every time they ignored my autonomy, they were giving up any right to my affection, my money, or my beautiful house. In 3 days, the new will would be signed. In 3 days, their future would be completely their own. But without my house, without my money, and without the slightest hope of claiming anything. The idea should have made me sad. Instead, as I watched the sunset paint my garden in golden and amber tones, all I felt was a deep, serene satisfaction. They had already made their choice, and now I had made mine. The call came at 7:03 in the morning, 2 days after I signed the new will. I was in my kitchen enjoying my first cup of coffee while watching the birds gather at the feeder I had placed by the window. The caller ID showed Ephraim's number, and something in the urgency of the hour told me it wasn't a call just to say hello. Mom, we need to talk right now. No greeting, no courtesy. His voice had a tone I hadn't heard since he was a teenager, and I had caught him in a lie. Good morning to you too, Ephraim. What's so urgent? Don't play dumb. I know what you did. I carefully set my cup down on the table, even though my heart was already racing. What exactly do you think I did? The will, Mom. Yesterday, Socorro Valdez's office called. Something about updated documents, and they needed to confirm the property address. Socorro had warned me that those types of calls were part of the standard procedure, but I had hoped we would have more time before everything came to light. Still, I felt strangely calm as I prepared for what was coming. I see, and what did they tell you? Nothing directly, but when I insisted on why they needed our property details, they said it wasn't relevant since we weren't beneficiaries. We're not beneficiaries, Mom. The accusation hung between us. I could hear Jimena's voice in the background, high-pitched and demanding, though I couldn't make out what she was saying. Do you want to come over and talk about it? I asked. We're on our way. They hung up. I looked at my peaceful kitchen, knowing it might be the last moment of quiet I'd have for a long time. Then I went upstairs to get dressed appropriately for the difficult day ahead. They arrived in less than 20 minutes, which meant they had already been calling from the car. Jimena's face was flushed with rage when I opened the door, and Ephraim looked like he hadn't slept. Get inside, Jimena demanded as she pushed past me into the foyer. I followed her into the living room where they stood like prosecutors about to deliver an indictment. How could you do this to us? Jimena's voice was shrill, without a trace of courtesy. After everything we did for you, after all our plans. What plans? I calmly interrupted. Don't pretend you don't know, Ephraim snapped. You made us believe we were going to live here. You encouraged us to plan the kids' future, our lives. I sat down in my favorite chair, the one overlooking the garden. I didn't do any of that. I listened to you while you assumed things. Assumed? Jimena's laugh was bitter. You showed us the house as if we already lived here. You talked about the kids' rooms, about having family close by. I was being cordial. You were guests in my home. Guests? Ephraim's voice broke. I'm your son. Yes, you are, and I'm your mother. But that doesn't make my house your house, or my money your money. Jimena started pacing, her designer heels hitting the hardwood floor furiously. This is insane. You're almost 70 years old, living alone in a house that's too big for you. We offered to help take care of you, and this is how you repay us, she yelled, clinging to the property as if it's only yours, lying to us, letting us plan our lives around something you never intended to give us. I looked at Ephraim, who was staring at the floor with his fist clenched. Do you see it that way too, that I lied to you? He raised his head, and for an instant, I saw something in his eyes that might have been pain. Mom, we need this house. My promotion comes with certain expectations, social obligations, and Jimena is pregnant. Pregnant? The word escaped me before I could stop it. Jimena's hand went to her still flat stomach. Her expression changed from anger to self-satisfaction. 3 months. We were going to tell you when we moved in. Make it a celebration. A grandchild. Another grandchild I would probably never know, never hold, never be allowed to love. The thought should have broken my heart, but instead it strengthened my resolve. Congratulations, I said simply. Congratulations? Himina looked at me incredulously. That's it? Your son is having a baby and all you say is congratulations? What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? That I'll fix this? That I'll put you back in the will, in the place that belongs to you? The place that belongs to you, I repeated. And exactly where do you think that place is? Ephraim took a step forward, using the same persuasive tone he used in the courtroom. Mom, let's be reasonable. You don't need a house this size. The maintenance alone must be overwhelming. And with the baby on the way, we really need more space. Then buy a bigger house. With what money? Amina shrieked. Do you know how much houses cost in decent neighborhoods? Do you know how much private schools cost? Do you know what it takes to give a child the life they deserve? The life your child deserves, I corrected. That's your responsibility, not mine. Jimena's face turned pale with fury. You're a selfish, bitter old woman. No wonder your husband left you to raise Ephraim alone. No wonder your own son can barely stand you. The words hit me like slaps, but I didn't flinch. Florencio didn't leave me, Jimena. He died. And yes, Ephraim can barely stand me. So why would you want to live in my house? Because it's not your house, she yelled. Not really. Ephraim is your only child, your only family. Everything you have should automatically go to him. That's how real families work. I walked to my desk and took out a folder I'd prepared that morning. Inside were copies of the new will, along with the letter Socorro had helped me write. Since you're so interested in my will, I said, handing the folder to Ephraim, you might as well know the whole truth. He opened it with trembling hands, Jimena reading over his shoulder. I watched their faces change as they processed the contents, from confusion to astonishment, from astonishment to horror, and from horror to rage. You left everything to a foundation, Ephraim's voice was barely a whisper. 2 silver threads. Yes, they help older people who have been abandoned by their families. Abandoned? Jimena's voice now sounded threatening. We never abandoned you. Oh, no? When was the last time either of you called just to talk? When was the last time you invited me somewhere without expecting something in return? When was the last time you treated me like someone you loved, and not a burden you resent? Ephraim was still staring at the papers, the house, the investments, everything. Jimena snatched the documents from his hands and frantically skimmed them. This can't be legal. You can't just cut out your only son. There are laws. There are laws about elder abuse, I said calmly. There are laws about coercion and manipulation, but there is no law that requires me to leave my money to people who treat me with contempt. We're going to challenge this, she snarled. We're going to fight it in court. Then I smiled, the first genuine smile since they had arrived. Read the last page, Jimena, the part about what happens if you challenge the will. Her eyes flew to the document, and I watched the color drain from her face as she read the clause that Socorro had insisted on including. If you challenge the will, I said in a serene voice, you forfeit any right to visit this property, even after it becomes a care center for abandoned seniors. By law, you will never be able to set foot here again. You can't do this, Ephraim said, his voice broken. I'm your son. Yes, you are, and I'm your mother, but being family doesn't give you a right to my life, my money, or my home. It certainly doesn't give you the right to treat me like a burden while you wait to inherit my assets. Jimena threw the papers to the floor, her face contorted with fury. You're going to regret this when you're dying alone in this house, when you have no one to take care of you. You'll remember this moment and wish you had been different. I looked at her, truly looked at her, and I didn't see the put-together, beautiful woman who had stolen my son's affection, but a small, greedy person whose entire worth depended on what she could get from others. I'm not going to die alone, Jimena. I'll be surrounded by people who have learned, like me, that blood doesn't make a family. Love does, respect does, and you haven't shown me either in years. Then they left, Ephraim gathering the scattered papers while Jimena stormed out the door. On the threshold, he turned one last time. Mom, please, there has to be a way to fix this. I looked at my son, this man I had raised, loved, and sacrificed for, and all I felt was a profound sadness for what he had become. There was always a way to fix this, Ephraim. You just never bothered to try. When the door closed behind them, I stood in the foyer, listening to them start the car. listening to them drive away from my life. As far as I knew, it would be the last time. Then I walked to my kitchen, poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, and sat down to enjoy the most peaceful morning I'd had in years. 6 months passed before I heard from them again. 6 months of the most serene and fulfilling life I had lived since Florencio's death. I threw myself into activities I had forgotten I enjoyed, organizing reading clubs in my library, volunteering at the community center, taking painting classes at the local studio. My house had become what it was always meant to be, a home, not a monument to loneliness. The call came on a Tuesday morning in the spring. I was in the garden, planting the roses I'd ordered from a catalog, when the phone rang inside the house. I almost didn't answer, but something in the persistence of the ringing made me wipe my hands on my gardening apron and go inside. "Hello, Mom." Ephraim's voice sounded smaller than I remembered, with a shyness that reminded me of the boy he once was. "Hello, Ephraim. I was wondering if we could talk in person." I looked out at my garden, at the roses waiting to be planted, at the life I had built without them. About what? About us. About what happened. Hamina and I are having some problems. Of course they were. I wondered how long it would take for the cracks to show once they realized my money wasn't going to be there to fix their messes. "I'm sorry to hear that. Can I come over? Just me, not Hamina. She doesn't want me to contact you." Despite everything, he was still my son. Despite the pain, the disappointment, a part of me had been waiting for this call. "Okay, this afternoon." "Thanks, Mom. I really mean it. Thanks." He arrived at 2 o'clock, driving the same BMW, but looking somehow more subdued. The confident lawyer who had stood in my living room 6 months ago demanding his inheritance had been replaced by a man who looked tired, insecure, older than his 38 years. I greeted him at the door, noticing how his eyes scanned the changes I had made. The foyer now had a small table with fresh flowers from my garden. The walls were filled with family photos, not just of him, but of Florencio's relatives, of friends I had reconnected with, of the women from my book club who had become like daughters to me. "The house looks different," he said. "It looks alive," I replied. "Would you like some coffee?" We sat in the sunroom, the very place where I had planned his disinheritance with Socorro. It was now furnished with comfortable wicker chairs and plants that thrived in the afternoon light. An easel stood in one corner, holding my latest painting, a landscape with the view from my bedroom window. "You paint now?" he asked, gesturing toward the easel. "I've always painted, Ephraim. I stopped when I got married to your father, and then never found the time to get back to my own thing." He nodded, his gaze fixed on his coffee cup. "I remember you used to paint at the kitchen table when I was a boy." "You have a good memory." We sat in silence for several minutes. I waited, knowing he had come for a reason, knowing he needed to get there in his own way. "Hamina left me," he inly said. "I'm so sorry." He looked at me with something that might have been hope. "Fuente, she said you'd be happy. She said you probably planned all of this." I carefully set my coffee cup on the table. "I didn't plan the end of your marriage, Ephraim. I planned to protect myself from people who only saw me as a source of money." "Is that really how you saw us?" The question was so genuine that for a moment, I saw the son I had raised, the boy who believed the world was fair, that good intentions always shone through. "How else could I see you? When was the last time you called me just to see how I was? When was the last time you visited me without asking for something?" He was silent for so long that I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a whisper, "I don't remember. Neither do I, but I loved you. I still love you." Do you love me, or do you love the idea of me? The mother who is always there when you need her, the one who you can sacrifice without asking, the one who should be grateful for any scrap of attention you give her? His eyes filled with tears. That's not fair." "Is it, though? Your wife leaves you, and suddenly you remember you have a mother. I'm sure things are tight financially without the inheritance you expected, and now you want to rebuild us. The money doesn't matter. Stop." My voice came out harsher than I intended. "Don't lie to me, Ephraim. Not anymore. That's over." He sank into the chair, defeated. "You're right. The situation is difficult. Divorce is expensive, and we were counting on that. We both were. We were expecting to inherit my house, to live here rent-free, and to use my savings as if they were your personal account. Said like that, it sounds awful because it was awful. You and Jimena treated me like a resource to be managed, not a person to be loved. But I did love you, he insisted. I still love you. I studied his face, looking for signs of the manipulations I had grown accustomed to. But I saw something I didn't expect, genuine remorse. Tell me about the divorce, I said. When she realized the money wasn't coming, she changed. She started talking about looking for someone with better prospects, with a family that had more to offer. She laughed bitterly. She said I had disappointed her by not being able to control my own mother. And the baby? His face contorted. She terminated the pregnancy. She said she wasn't going to stay with a man who couldn't give her the lifestyle she deserved. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Whatever I thought of Jimena, losing a grandchild I would never know was a pain I hadn't expected. I'm sorry, Ephraim. That's unforgivable. She said it was your fault, that if you had just given us the house, none of this would have happened. Do you believe that? He was quiet for a long time, staring at my garden where butterflies fluttered among the flowers. I wanted to believe it. It was easier than accepting that I had married someone who only loved me for what I could give her. Just like you, who only wanted me for what I could give you. The words hung between us like a bridge that neither of us knew if we wanted to cross. Ephraim's shoulders began to shake, and I realized he was crying for real. Not those fake tears I'd seen before, but the broken sobs of a man who was finally understanding what he had lost. Forgive me, Mom. Forgive me for everything. For not defending you, for not valuing you, for letting her treat you that way. Forgive me for not being the son you deserved. I watched him cry, this man who had hurt me so much, and I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't forgiveness. That would take time if it ever came. But maybe it was the beginning of understanding. Ephraim, look at me. He raised his head, his face red and tear-streaked. I need you to understand something. I didn't change my will to punish you. I changed it to protect myself. I couldn't keep giving pieces of myself to people who saw those pieces as a right instead of a gift. I know, I see it now. Do you really? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear because you hope I'll change my mind about the money? The question hit him like a physical blow. I don't know. I wish I could say the money doesn't matter, but I can't honestly say that losing it isn't what brought me here. His sincerity surprised me. At least you're being honest. I'm trying. I'm trying to figure out how to be the person you taught me to be and not the one I ended up becoming. I poured myself more coffee while I thought, and what does that look like? I don't know. Maybe learning to live with less, figuring out how to be alone without feeling sorry for myself, calling you just to talk, not because I need something. What if I told you right now that the will isn't going to change, that you're never going to inherit this house or my money? Then what? He was silent for a long time. Then I guess I'd have to learn to live with that, and maybe I'd ask if I could still come to visit sometimes, not to convince you of anything, but just to spend time with you. Why? Because you're my mother, because I love you, even if I haven't shown it the way I should. Because I don't want to lose you completely. I looked at this man, my son, my greatest pride and my greatest disappointment, and I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Hope. The will isn't going to change, Ephraim. His face fell, but he nodded. I understand. But you can come to visit if you wish. If you can accept that this relationship has to be different from what it was before. Different in what way? On equal terms, without the expectation that I exist only for your convenience, without assuming that my love is unconditional, without continuing to take, without giving anything in return. I'd like to try. I know it won't be easy, Pesest, and trust is earned, not inherited. I understand that. I stood up and walked to the window, looking at my rose bushes, which I had finally planted and were beginning to bloom. There's something else you should know. Silver Threads plans to use this house as a residence in a few years, when I can no longer live here alone. And you're okay with that? I look forward to it. I want to be surrounded by people who understand what it's like to be rejected by family, and who have learned to form true bonds through friendship. Will there be room? Will there be space for family members who want to make things right? I turned to him, and I no longer saw the arrogant man who demanded his inheritance, but the insecure boy who once depended on me for everything. I suppose that depends on the family, doesn't it? Then he smiled. a genuine smile that reminded me why I'd loved him so intensely for so many years. Can I help you in the garden? I remember when I was a kid, you used to let me plant things. I'd like to do it again. As we walked out to the yard together, I felt lighter than I had in decades. The money would still go to charity. The house would still be a refuge for people like me. But maybe, just maybe, it would also become a place where a mother and son could learn to love each other again. Not out of obligation or expectation, but by choice. It was more than I had dared to hope for, and exactly what I had had the courage to demand, a love that was worth it, or nothing at all. In the end, I got both. The story we are telling is fictional, but it is based on some real events. Names and places have been changed to protect the identity of those involved. We tell this not to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and stop to think, how many mothers are suffering in silence in their own homes? I am truly curious. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to be silent to keep the peace, or would you dare to face it all to reclaim your voice? I want to know what you think because every story is a candle that can light the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I firmly believe that courage leads us to better days. Did you enjoy my story? From which city are you listening? Let's meet in the comments. I'm really looking forward to hearing your thoughts. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks, which helps me continue bringing you more stories. Thank you sincerely for your kind support. On the screen, you'll find 2 more live stories that I highly recommend. There is so much more waiting for you on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. See you in the next live story.